I already said that colonial consciousness implies that we take imaginary entities as real entities. That is, we think that events and objects which do not exist in our culture, we believe they exist, and we also can talk intelligibly about them. Let me give you an example. For instance, we all say that religions exist in India, and Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism are different religions. When you speak to other people, especially in your local languages, vernacular languages, you normally don't use the word dharma to speak about these things, even though now and then it's used, especially in the last 100 years. And when you meet someone on the street in a local language, you don't ask, what is your dharma? Aapka dharma kya hai? You don't ask that. In other words, this notion that we use religion as an equivalent of dharma, or the suggestion that we use them as equivalents, comes from the British colonials, who thought that religion could be translated as dharma because they assumed that Hinduism is a religion. Take certain two very interesting absurd consequences of this. One would be rather tragic in nature. Take, for instance, the notion that puja gets translated as worship. Now, if we do this, and if really, because remember, worship is always a worship of the gods, either the true god or the false gods. So if we say during Ayudha Puja, which they do in South India, for instance, where they do puja to cars, to autos, to lorries, to cycles and so on, then we have to say these people are worshipping cars and autos and cycles as gods. Now, I don't believe there exists a single Indian who thinks that a cycle or a Maruti car created the cosmos. Yet we say we are worshipping the car by doing puja to it. Now, this is an absurd way of transforming Indians into morons by assuming that worship is puja, devas are gods, and of course religion is dharma. But take a much more tragic example of that. We have all heard of so-called Hindu-Muslim conflicts in India. You see, we all assume, at least the newspapers tell us, most of us assume, that it's a religious conflict. Now just think about this suggestion for a minute. It is true there was a conflict. It is true there was all kinds of sufferings inflicted upon all kinds of people. It's true also that Muslims were one of the communities involved in it. But if Hinduism is not a religion and Islam is one, could it be the case that the conflict between Muslims and non-Muslim groups in the north regarding Ayodhya or whatever, especially in Gujarat, was not a religious conflict? If it is not a religious conflict, and if we further assume that secularism helps solve religious conflict, then trying to implement more secularism in India is to solve a conflict, and the conflict is not religious, is going to create problems to you. In other words, you see, this way of confusing and believing and insisting that we are not confused, and this way of describing entities which do not exist in India as though they exist in India, this is colonial consciousness. Now, this is not merely a vague issue that scholars have to confront, but this is something all of us do.